Katoa. Nau mai haere mai ki tēnei hui o te kauri he Rotorua. Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Rotorua Lakes Council. We are here today on the 5th of December for our annual plan workshop talking about LTP Year 2 delivery. Before we get underway, I'll just remind you that this is being live streamed and please have your mobile phones on silent. We will be finishing today's workshop by 3:30 or maybe 3:30. And I don't have any apologies. I expect Councillor Kirioba to be joining us online. So I will open this up with the karakia and then we'll get underway. Tūtaua mai runga, tūtaua mai raro, tūtaua mai roto, tūtaua mai waho. Kia tau wai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, I'll now hand over to Thomas to overview this presentation and take us through this workshop.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll try to be very quick, but give you an opportunity to ask some questions. Just following some of the previous discussions, we're going to talk about two things today. In open, we will be talking about the Rotorua Sewerage Scheme as part of the discussions, talking about how it's funded and what some of the different opportunities may be ahead of us. And then confidential, we will be talking about some property proposals to consider. And the reason that they're confidential is there's some commercial sensitivity around some of those elements of that. So with that, just a reminder around where we are on the journey. Just quickly, a number of workshops that have been had. We've more to be had. We're anticipating into February after the Christmas break and having been scheduling a number of workshops to start finalising what the drafting plan would look like. Decision in March to engage consult and then potentially consultation engagement in April, and then dominoing through the elections depending on what agree to have in the annual plan. So, Rotorua, bit of context and a bit of background, I guess. Why are we doing that scheme? As we all know, we've put reticulation around a number of our lakes. Many of those were defunded through the Rotorua Lakes Trust entity and supported by MFE. And we've been doing these sewerage schemes around the lakes, particularly around Erie, Rotorua, around since early 2005. And one of the remaining ones is the Rotorua one, which we have consulted on a number of times through our LTP, and we do currently have a current LTP proposal, which will go into a little more detail on that. So why are we doing this? Well, the Regional Council issued its OSEP rules. So that means from 2017, all Rotorua properties will be required to have a resource consent for septic tanks or install an OSEP compliance system, which will, my understanding, is also still require a resource consent to do that. Based on our understanding of the modelling and where some of those properties sit with regards to low-lying water tables and similar to the lake, about 170 of those properties might be able to comply with the OSEP rules. To have a system installed that complies, and so as a result, as alternative option, RLC is consulted with the public around putting in a reticulation scheme for that, and bring that, connecting that reticulation scheme to the one that's at Okaka and bringing that back into the Western Treatment Plant. And the Regional Council indicated, I think, that they'll be reluctant to issue a consent for a septic tank going forward if there is a reticulation scheme that's available of those properties. The budget that sits within the current long-term plan, I guess, is table 1, which sits in that top right-hand corner, which allows for about $29 million over a number of years, broken into 2 stages. Stage 1 is the main trunk line, which is, as we know, is almost complete, and stage 2 is the on-site connections. And in the previous council decision, and with that budget, the funding from the MFE of $6.5 million, the funding from the Regional Council of $750, RLC's contribution to the scheme, which is covered through the Lakes Enhancement Rate of $2,700 a property, consistent with what we've done for Rotorua Lakes. That brought the estimated costs to each property at $44,000 GST. Since then, you've made a decision around applying the federal funding decision towards the Rotorua scheme. We still need to have a discussion around how that can be allocated. And with the pausing of the work, we've incurred, I think, roughly $1.2 million of costs as a result of that pause. And anticipated going forward, it's meant to be live stream, sorry. I'll continue on. So we anticipate that the final escalation costs by the time that the pipe is completed and the properties are connected are likely to be in the $2 million range. And so table 2 reflects that revised cost, $29 million, 31.6, so that is a $2.6 million change. Subsidies are the same. We've brought in council contribution of one of those terms a little bit different. Sorry about that. Diverting the federal funding, and so while the $2 million has come in to offset, there's more costs coming in, and so therefore the estimated cost per property is $43,500.
Sorry, Thomas, I jump in, and so the difference in the council contribution is from the decision made in the long-term plan to change the subsidy lakes enhancement rate from $1,500 per property to $2,700 per property. So table 2 reflects the current situation.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt. I have the authority that the live stream is not currently happening.
Yep, so the team, as they heard you the first time, Councillor, I think Rob has gone off to check that.
Wonder if we
because we are quite time constrained.
Bit of a matter of public interest, that's all.
Well, I'll leave it to the chair.
I can
I'm
confirm
looking
that
at the YouTube.
it is live.
I'm looking at the YouTube live right now. Are you seeing the same, Councillor Wing? Yeah. Okay. Please carry on. Thank you. Oh, and just for Councillor's reference, this was checked just this week as well, including yesterday, to make sure that everything runs smoothly. It's looking good. Thank you. Please carry on, Thomas.
So, as you'll see in both those tables, there's roughly $20 or $21 million left to be recovered across the direct beneficiaries of the scheme, which are the property owners, and there's roughly 550 of those. And I just reiterate again that the Lakes Enhancement Rate. So there. So when you look at the funding of this scheme, and one of the things that the councillors have raised in the past, and I think the community has raised in the past, is that why is this scheme not receiving the same levels of subsidies that the other schemes have? And the big difference there is that this scheme isn't one of the deeded lakes with regards to the MFE funding, where we're working with a tri-party, the Regional Council, MFE, and ourselves, and TOLT. And so it doesn't draw the same level of subsidy as the other lakes. And so when the question is there for us is that can these costs or subsidies be increased? Stavros about a year ago has reached out to the MFE, and they've made it very clear that the $6.5 million contribution that they've put in is it. There is no desire to put any more in. And so if all those other external avenues of putting more money in to reduce the cost back to the direct beneficiaries isn't there, then there are things that we could consider, such as what we've done with Rotorua, whereby we could look at leveraging the Lakes Enhancement Rate or the Sewerage Targeted Rate. And saying that if Council therefore wishes to consider alternative ways of funding it than what we've originally consulted on, it means that we do need to consult on those changes, and hence why we're having this discussion to get your direction to move forward as to whether we finalise a proposal and do consultation. So, I guess to get to the nitty gritty, what could a funding change look like? What we're showing here is what a $1 million change in funding. So if we were to move $1 million of cost away from the Tarawera residents or the property owners and move it to the wider ratepayer base, what would that look like? And so $1 million would have an effect of $1,800 exclusive of GST, obviously, impact on the property owners. So if you looked at those tables before where we were talking 44,000 inclusive of GST, it would bring that amount down by that 1,800, and it would have the other effect of, depending on which rate that's sat on, of $2.80 per on the Lakes Enhancement rate for 25 years, because we'd look to recover that cost over a 25-year period, or on the sewerage targeted rate of $3.40. And the reason for those differences is that there's different number of ratepayers that pay those targeted rates. Sewerage targeted rate is only paid for by properties that are connected to the scheme, and the Lakes Enhancement rate is only paid by properties within the Bay of Plenty Regional Council catchment. I'm happy to pause here and have any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Tamana. Kudo for you. Thank you, Thomas. Thomas, could I just clarify, so if when you say that that's paid for by the Bay of Plenty catchment, if we did something through our rate, so that would only be our ratepayers, is that correct?
Because these are, we can only set rates for ourselves.
Correct.
So the Lakes Enhancement rate does not cover properties within the Waikato Regional Council catchment, only covers properties within the Bay of Plenty Regional Council catchment in our district. Yep.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you. Just want to clarify that.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's been this reference to the 170 properties that couldn't have an OSET system. Could I have a copy of the list of those properties, please?
I'm not sure that personal information is appropriate.
Well, this is the basis for the reticulation scheme. This is a premise for it.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Councillor.
Irrelevant. Sorry, our meeting is to discuss the financials. Those decisions have been made. Whether you're pro the reticulation scheme or not, that's been passed by the previous council and also by us when we've allowed contracts to go through. So,
Thank you, Councillor.
done and dusted. Thank you.
We'll take that on board.
Right of reply,
Are
please.
there any questions? There is no right of reply to point of orders. He is correct. Do you have any questions regarding how we're going to move forward? This is our opportunity to find solutions for our community.
Yes, so our community are a wee bit concerned about where we're going on all of this, and they would like some answers to some of these questions. What other councils are you aware of that are charging their ratepayers tens of thousands of dollars for a reticulation scheme? I haven't been able to find any by asking Uncle Google.
It's a very common practice for councils when they extend infrastructure like this to existing properties to recover it through capital rate, which is why the legislation allows for it.
Would you be able to provide me with a list of some of the others?
I'm sure you're more than capable of researching every other council's rates funding impact statement to see how they do that.
Do you have any questions regarding the change of funds? So, as you can see before you, there is the option of change of funding. Do you have any questions regarding that and the proposal that is being put forward?
That's pretty self-explanatory what we have there, so no.
Thank you. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te manukura o tira, tēnā kōrua, it's Davros Thomas. Just a quick question. That's based on the 550 property owners. Should some of those not choose to go with the scheme, would that number come down and then be spread out, then the cost be spread out amongst those that are still there?
Councillor, we're going to come to that in a couple of slides.
Tēnā koe.
Thank you. We'll hold that question until then. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, just doing some maths in my head and using the trusty calculator. $2.80 plus $3.40 per ratepayer. Is that what covers the 1,818 per property? Or is it just one of those?
No. So $1 million as a one-off to those property owners reduces the cost of the scheme by $1,800. So if I go back to this slide here, where we're talking 4,350 or 44,000 per property, it has the effect of bringing that one-off cost down. So if people make a lump sum, that's what they'll save. The targeted rate that we use to collect that, we'll calculate out later, sorry. If we put the $1 million on the Lakes Enhancement rate, the residents will have a one-off $1,800 benefit, and 27,000 ratepayers will pay $2.80 extra for 25 years.
Right.
If you decide to leverage the sewage targeted rate for $1 million, it is there for $1,800 one way and $3.40 for the other.
So if we made, taking that out then, if we made that $30 or $34 per ratepayer, that would be 10 million?
Yeah, so you can do multiples of 10, and I think in the future, if there is a willingness to consult on an alternative, we would put proposals together of what you would like to consult on to move those costs around. So,
yeah, so rather than running every scenario, we just use the unit of $1 million to give a comparative.
So, yeah, so
It can be scaled up or down.
Right.
4 million would be 4 times, 10 million would be 10 times, yeah. Hope that makes sense. So,
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Thomas. Maybe because this has been around a while, I've forgotten. Didn't we have a fund from Environment New Zealand or whatever that was looking for it up there? Were they going to contribute to this?
Yep. So back in these tables, we have the external subsidies line for each of those, 7.25 million. 6.5 million is from MFE that you're referring to, and the other 750 that makes that, well, not quite 750 is the regional council.
It's from.
Yep.
Okay.
There appear to be no further questions. Thank you.
Yeah, so the big challenge that we're actually having at the moment is the challenge of, and I guess it's the process of how we do this. So we can't just go onto people's properties and then go install a grinder pump and connect their properties and disestablish their septic tanks without their approval. And to do this sort of work, it does require a building consent and locality planning on where these grinder pumps go and so forth. And we actually need people's agreement and the property's owner agreement. And in light of, I guess, the concerns from some of the residents around the cost, even though we've consulted on them and we've started building the scheme and we've done it on the basis of what we consulted on, there is a group out there that are encouraging people not to agree to sign up, so therefore we can't do the installs, which is leading to further cost. And so one of the questions is being asked is that, can we leverage this, and what are some other mechanisms that we have available to us to encourage the property owners to agree to connect, in which point we can therefore progress on. And so what we have here is, I guess, a number of scenarios. And I guess before I do that is, whenever we do these, we're required to do a capital funding plan. And the capital funding plan identifies, I guess, who the exacerbators are, who the beneficiaries are, and how this should be funded. And so the capital funding plan at the moment reflects on where we landed in the long-term plan, which is effectively table 1 of that schedule before. And one of the issues there is with some of the residents is they're saying, well, we're only getting about 26 or 30% subsidy, all these others got 30, can you get more money? Well, we've tried with MFE and they're not willing to get more. And so if we can lower the cost to them, are you therefore prepared to sign up and connect? And so that's one of the discussions and rationale that's being talked about. And so what this here deals with is, I guess, is some different options around how we can encourage those property owners to agree to those installs so we can progress, which also helps maintain the cost, because the longer we have contractors wanting to connect properties but unable to do so, the costs with regards to contractual escalations escalate. And so Down the first one there, I'm sorry, I do need to read this a little bit to make sure that I do get it right. Is 1A and 1B, which is effectively setting the rate and agreeing with the community that actually we will deliver the scheme with regards to this costs, and therefore provides certainty to them. And there's two different options around setting the rate early to give therefore that community certainty, and by setting it early we're suggesting that come 1 July next year, if we can get the pipeline completed and a good portion of those properties connected, which the time frame does allow if there's willingness there, the scheme is therefore fairly well committed, the costs are known, and we can set the rate for that whole community, which therefore gives them certainty that by the time the remaining properties connect, they know that they'll pay that rate that we've set. Or alternatively, we can set the rate on completion, but then there's no guarantee therefore that the cost that we're talking about now will be there, and that targeted rate may be higher depending on the number of people that connect or not, escalation and those sorts of aspects. So therefore one of the avenues of, even subject to the rates discussion that we talked about before, lakes enhancement and all the rest, funding change, setting that rate early to give that community certainty. So are we legally allowed to do that? Yes, if the scheme, and we can demonstrate that the pipe is connected, that there's properties there and that it's working and that it's well underway, and we're in those stages of connecting the remaining properties, we are legally able to set that rate, which means all properties there in that catchment that have connected and will connect shortly after will pay that capital rate from that date. So that's, I guess, the difference between 1A and 1B. Is that it provides certainty by setting that rate before the completion, and the risk there is that while it gives certainty to the property owner, the risk, should the cost escalate, therefore sit with council and the wider ratepayer. But that therefore may be a mechanism to encourage them to sign up and connect. The other option, so that's based on the current funding, the other options is 2A and 2B to do similar with regards to setting the rate early or later at the end, but also going out and consulting on leveraging some of those other rating mechanisms that we have available, which therefore shifts the direct cost of that scheme portion of it away from the direct beneficiaries and off to the wider ratepayer base. And again, you can wait until the whole scheme is completed and the properties are connected and then set the rate, or you can choose to use those mechanisms, set the rate early, which again then provides that certainty for those properties that are still choosing to sign up, and encourage them to sign up. And then the supplementary one is whereby the scheme is effectively two stages that we've talked about before. One is the main trunk line, and it's got pump stations and it connects, effectively setting a rate that recovers the cost of that. And then those properties that have connected and are willing to connect by a certain date will pay the capital rate for connecting, and then all those other properties that are choosing not to, effectively saying, well, when you are therefore required to connect into the future, you will just pay that via a lump sum or a connection fee. And so those are some of the options that are available to us. And the reason why they would be required to connect is that it's very unlikely that the regional council will issue a resource consent for those properties that aren't able to go offset. They've got little to no choice but to connect, because there's no viable option. And to get a resource consent to put an offset system in may be difficult with the regional council, considering there's a reticulation scheme that would go in front of the property. And so therefore in that scenario, even if the property owners chose not to connect, they'll still get a capital targeted rate to recover stage one, which is the main trunk line. They would still pay availability rate on the pan charge, and then they would have to work with the regional council as to how they deal with their septic tank. And so those are, I guess, the 5 scenarios, or 3, I guess, or if you include the A's and B's, that we're considering at the moment. So happy to pause there. Well, of course, several, yeah, join in.
With Madam Chair and elected members, just I want to recap a couple of things. The scheme has been requested by the Tarawera residents after the Bay of Plenty Regional Council implemented the offset rule. The scheme was consulted at least 4 times formally with the community. We have received community feedback, and the messages are 3. 1, the vast majority of the Tarawera residents want articulation. 2, residents express disquiet about the apparent inequity between these schemes of funding and earlier schemes. And the reason, of course, we know is because the earlier schemes received a 50% subsidy from the deed agreements, and Tarawera was not part of the deeds. And the third position or view of the residents is that they wanted cost certainty. Because, as long as, costs like, for example, the protest in Rotorua Lakes and they impose costs, they add costs to the project, and they fear they have cost uncertainty. So when we consider the options, I would ask elected members to consider that the Tarawera community requested the council to implement the scheme. It was not imposed by the council. The Tarawera community overwhelmingly supported the articulation, they seek certainty, and they seek cost equity. So these are the 4 themes we received from 4 formal consultations from our community up there. Thank you.
Might just say the subsequent slides probably help to understand what we're really asking you here today. So maybe crack on if there are no more questions.
So therefore the thinking is around a pathway to move forward is to use the Better Off funding pool of money of $2.05 million as an incentive to get as many of the properties to sign up by the 1st of March. So that is saying that if you sign up by the 1st of March, you'll get your fair share of that amount. And looking at capping it, but what it means is that if I said before, $2 million divided by 550 was $1,800 each. If 400 of them sign up, then they'll get a slightly larger share of that 1,800, and those that didn't sign up will miss out. And so therefore it's an incentive to get them to sign up. Therefore recognising that those that don't sign up will therefore have to pay slightly more, because those calcs before took into account the cost escalations and the fact that the Better Off funding was reducing it, so therefore your cost would be higher, because you won't participate in any of that $2 million offset. And then furthermore, that if by 1 July a scheme is therefore the main trunk line is completed, we will set the targeted rate with regards to stage 1, which is the main trunk line, and also set the rate for the properties that have connected. So there'll be 2 targeted rates there covering this component, stage 1 and stage 2. So one covering the main trunk line, one covering the wider connection of the properties that all agreed to join up. And that will be followed up, therefore, if that you're not part of that and you've chosen instead to say, actually, I'm going to stick this out, you will be required to comply with the offset rules with the regional councils, and you'll need to file a resource consent. RLC won't support you in that resource consent application because we've put a reticulation scheme right there for you to connect to. And so if you're unable to therefore get that consent across the line of the regional council and have a compliant system, then you'll need to connect to the RLC sewer system, and you will pay the direct cost of that installation that is specific to your property. happy to take any questions on the proposed methodology.
Thank you very much. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you to Manakura. Gentlemen, could I ask why have we got two different dates, the 1st of July? Why don't we just make it 1 March?
Because 1 July is the date that you would set the rate. So what we're saying here is that we will set the rate for that new financial year to recover the cost of stage 1 and also to, if you want, to cover the separate rate for stage 2.
So, thank you. And are there more slides to come?
Yeah.
I'll hold my other questions.
Just one more. I might just also add to that to an answer to your question, Councillor O'Brien. Two things. One is there's also, as Stavros mentioned, there's a view that by some residents that they don't have a choice about this, and that RLC is forcing this upon them, which, as we've explained, isn't really the case. So what we're trying to do with that second date is give properties the option to opt out. To your question, Councillor Waru, obviously that comes with very significant risks, but we've obviously made that pretty transparent to the properties that might want to choose that path. So 1 March allows us to proceed with the annual plan. So that cut-off date allows the team to go and process that into the annual plan in order to strike the rate by the 1st of July. And the 1st of July, as Thomas mentioned, is a cut-off date for an opt-in or opt-out. So we're trying to create opportunities for people to both sign up early, participate, take advantage of any subsidies, both from the Better Off and any others that you might allocate through this annual plan process, and still have time for those to be captured in the model. And 1 July is a little bit more time for people who want to say, actually, I'm going to take the risk myself. I'm going to opt out of the scheme completely. And by that stage, we'd be setting the two different rates.
So, sorry, that would be those that decide to pursue an offset system, is that correct?
Decide to
not
make their own decisions and not connect to our scheme.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
I think that's pretty clear, but just checking, the 15K and 3, everyone pays regardless of whether they connect or not.
Correct. Stage 1 is regardless. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just double checking, right back at the start, we talked about the cost escalations because of the delay. The delay, is that what happened with the protest, or the delay by the residents who have refused to sign up?
The lion's share of the cost of delays because of the protest, the downtime of the contractor, and security and the legal costs, right, and all. And there is an evolving cost escalation because we do not have enough properties to streamline the on-property installation processes, and the contractor is less efficient in installations.
Right. So technically, the protest, which was not by the residents of Tarawera, has actually been lumped into the overall cost. Is that the way I understand it?
It's currently being treated as a cost of delivering the scheme, yes.
The scheme, right. Okay, thank you.
So I might just add that's absolutely stand by that response at this point. Right? At a point where the installation of the pipe, stage 1, is complete, the ongoing risk then flips very much onto property owners.
Councillor Brown.
So for clarification, the cost of the protest sits inside the 43,000 figure.
Yep, so
That's included.
at this table 2 in the corner there, 43,500, that has got an additional $2 million, or $2.5 million of estimated cost escalation. Costs we've incurred to date and anticipated to complete, and that's being offset by the Better Off funding being applied into there as well.
Okay, but that's where it sits.
Yep.
Have we given any thought to where else it might, the cost of the protest might sit?
Yep, so in one of the things you can consider when talking about utilising some of those other rates to help fund that scheme as to whether you would like those costs to be borne by a different set of ratepayers and leveraging those other funding mechanisms to offset that cost away from the direct beneficiaries of the scheme. Yep.
Through you, Chair. And that is the targeted rate. So you're saying put it in, but use the targeted rate. Are there no other alternatives that we've considered other than the targeted rates to deal with that part?
So our funding policy for our activity, our sewage activity is only funded by 3 methods: trade waste charges, sewage targeted rates, and the lakes enhancement rate. And so because this is a sewage activity, without consulting wider, and that's an LTP amendment, we can't have the general rate covering that cost.
Okay.
Hence why we've only recommended rates that sit and currently fund the sewage activity.
Good. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I might just add to that and say that's consistent with your decision in the long-term plan to allocate funding to cover cost escalations that were not foreseen by property owners to be covered by, in that case, the lakes enhancement rate. This is totally consistent with that logic.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Manukura. Could I just ask, sorry, as someone who's not technically over these issues, when we say we will not support any applications under number 4, anyone applying for an offset system, could you explain to me, like, is there a cost to us if someone was to get an offset system? Do they use council facilities in any way? Or is there a cost to us? And sorry, you'll have to dumb it down for me.
The Plenty Regional Council, who is the regulator for the offset rule, has made a clear statement since 2021 that in property owner seeking to obtain a resource consent to install an offset plan, they will have to apply directly to the Regional Council. The Regional Council's policy, again, is very clear that in the presence of a reticulated system, they're highly unlikely to issue a resource consent. And also, because it's a discretionary activity, they will have to publicly notify such an application, which means that it's highly unlikely that other people will not object to it. And also, the Bay of Plenty Regional Council will require our written consent for an offset plan to be installed when we have a reticulation system. So the cost for us is that it's a diminishing rate of return for the cost sunk into the main system. If a number of people, in theory or hypothetically, opted to go for an offset installation, and that means the net environmental effects are not really addressed, that the capital costs sunk into the stage 1 and preliminary planning for the scheme will not be shared equally by everyone. And obviously in the long term too, we have to consider how that offset plan, if it was installed, is going to impact on our other water quality costs to monitor and manage. So both the Ministry of Health and the Regional Council's policy are very clear about that. A reticulated system managed by a central authority such as Rotorua Lakes Council is a preferred option for public health and for the health of the environment. And that's why it's going to be a lot of hurdles for someone to apply for an offset plan in the presence of a reticulation system in the proximity of the property.
Thank you. And finally, could I just ask, is there any danger if we don't get a certain, sorry, if I say a percentage, just for argument's sake, is there any danger of us losing or putting at risk the Ministry of Environment funding if it wasn't close to 100%?
No. The reason why you would see from the tables down there the cost per property for stage 1, we benchmarked that $15,000 per property, is fairly lower than the on-property system. And the reason for that is that the deed of funding with the Ministry of the Environment, the $6.5 million, was hypothecated on stage 1. There is no, condition to say you have to complete the scheme and get all the properties reticulated. But the MFE was very clear they wanted that money to be dedicated to stage 1, which would be the enabler of the reticulation. So financially, the council can recover, the balance, the net cost of that, but the whole system in totality would not be efficient if, for argument, only 50 properties were connected to the system. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I might just add, just for clarity, if I was a property owner that fell within number 4, let's say council decided to do all these things and I sat in number 4 and I'm taking that chance, I will still get a rate bill from council that covers the $15,000 for stage 1. I'll get an availability charge for the pan charge, which will be 50% of the current $900 a year pan charge. And then on top of it, so I'll pay that regardless. And then I've got to go do the work around getting a successful installation of offset. So they will still pay those costs. They won't be excluded from those.
Thank you. And we had a final question from Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe, he te munukura. So, just so I can get it clear in my mind, it is highly unlikely that and correct me if I'm wrong, that a consent would be granted due to the fact, if they went to do their own thing, due to the fact that it requires them to be compliant with us and regional council. Is that what we're saying?
Correct, and such an application will be publicly notified. And remember, when we responded to the community's request, we have received an ambiguous expectations from Manawhenua that the reticulation needs to happen the soonest possible way. So one can imagine if a property A applies for resource consent to avoid connected reticulation, you can imagine how many people will object to it.
Thank you. And just for a bit more clarity too, so that, well, our position is really based on the fact that it would contradict what we're trying to achieve in terms of we have a reticulation solution there, so we couldn't really support any of that. Gotcha. Thank you.
So I guess what we're needing your direction on, therefore, is whether you want staff to go off and do some more work, and that's around, I guess, preparing a number of scenarios and options for you to consider on whether you wish to consult on that. And so it'd be twofold. One around, do you want to leverage some of those other targeted rates and us coming back with some scenarios on what that could look like and achieve, and then on top of that as well as options around setting that rate earlier to give that certainty to the community, and also therefore leveraging in that tactic that we've talked about before around putting some more flesh on the bones on these proposals for you to consider to consult on. And happy to leave it there.
Thank you. So this is just an opportunity for any discussion or any direction that councillors wish to give at this stage. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just running through the scenario in my head, the lakes enhancement rate is for the maintenance and improvement of the quality of our lakes, correct? Just generally. So that's all lakes, including Tarawera. So Rotorua residents and visitors can access all lakes. So if there is a lakes enhancement rate, and doing the numbers based on those figures that we looked at before, if we were looking at 20 million to raise funds through that lakes enhancement rate to offset the overall project cost, is my maths correct that would be $68 per ratepayer over the next 10 years? Would it be $6.80 per year for 10 years?
We'll just go back to the slide.
I think, Council, I don't want to get into a discussion of what that rate could be and the amount. What we would like to do is get direction from you whether you want us to do modelling on different scenarios for you to consider. So again, we've got that example for you. I think for your purposes, if you're looking to target $10 million, you can multiply those numbers by 10 if you wish. So yeah.
So the payment for the residents who live there, their current payment plan is 10 years, is that right? 25?
No, it's 25, yep.
Okay, so, right, all right, thank you, you've answered my question.
And also just clarify that that figure is per year for 25 years.
And to put in a perspective, $20 million is far more than this entire district is putting into our Rotorua Museum. It's a significant infrastructure project, so that would be quite a lot. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Someone needs to correct me if I've got this wrong, but what I understand the community wants is for that 43,500 figure to land somewhere closer to 36. To do that, it is 4 times $4 million, and this is where you guys will need to check this on. 4 times the lake enhancement rate gets it down to, gets 7,200 odd, which gets it down to 36,200. I would, and also the community would like that surety now, and I think we use the better off funding to leverage sign up as a starting point for consultation. That would be where I think we start. I'm not sure I've missed anything, but that's where I think I would suggest we start.
And $4 million would also move the funding between direct beneficiaries and subsidy external to be roughly 50-50.
Councillor O'Brien. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Manakuta. Stavros, could I ask, so when we said those two scenarios, 43,000, sorry, 43.5, 44.5, could I ask, are those substantially, sorry. Oh, sorry. Could I ask?
Lani, could you just mute your video, please?
I think then the series on its 7.
Sorry, Stavros. So from those two figures there, are they, could you tell me what was the original estimation that we would have given the residents of Tarawera?
In 2018, the Tarawera community proposed the option. The council in 2020 considered that option to implement the scheme, and the initial estimate on base of $22.5 million of the gross cost of the scheme would cost the average Tarawera property owner about $33,000 per property. That was the estimate, with all the uncertainties that we did not have design and pieces of work. That was a 2020 estimate, about $33,000 per property.
Right, so now we're talking approximately 43, 44 in that ballpark. So that's roughly a $10,000 increase on what?
Yes.
Okay, no, that's fine, thank you. My second questions will be around an email that council has received the other day, which I won't quote from directly because I don't know that I have that person's permission, but there was talk about a swap with Environment Bay of Plenty. Now, if I can quote from the Bay of Plenty Regional Council's long-term plan, and just to be fair, I'm quoting from page 202 from volume 2 of the long-term plan, and it's titled Scheduled Funding Impact. The Rotorua Lakes activity targeted rate, which was currently budgeted for this year, the current year, to be $4,489,000. The following year, $3,497,000. Then finally, $1,497,000 486,000 before being eliminated. Could I ask you, is that approximately the same amount of ratepayers paying that scheme compared to our scheme?
I'm assuming that every ratepayer in the Rotorua district pays that regional council rate, and if that is the case, then that would be the equivalent of all the ratepayers that pay the Lakes Enhancement rate. Those two should match.
Approximately.
Approximately, yes.
Thank you for that. Could I ask Te Manukura if anyone around this table is aware of any commitments, either verbally or written, to any Tarawera group that there was in effect, an agreement to swap, whereby EBOP reduced their fee and we would then introduce or raise one of either our existing rates or introduce a new rate?
I'm getting head shakes around the table. There hasn't been an agreement on that.
No, that's fine, thank you, because I'm struggling to recall any vote that we ever had around it, so...
No, we certainly have not had a vote.
Exactly, thank you. If you don't mind, I might hold off discussion till later on. I just wanted to get those clarifications. Thank you very much.
This is the last slide, so...
Any further discussion on Tarawera? Councillor Waru.
Kia ora, just a quick question. So, let's just say, is there a timeline in which, let's say we go with number one? What would that look like given the annual planning stuff and all that's going to be piling up very shortly?
So we do have a placeholder for a workshop next week. This is something that the team could do some modelling on and present you with some options pre-Christmas, which also may help provide some sort of guidance or certainty to that community around our commitment to that scheme going forward.
I would support that.
Yeah, I guess I'd say maybe there's some value in that. Maybe there isn't much value in that, given we're not going to have any new information between then and now. I guess if the direction is that there is an appetite, some councillors have expressed openness to considering changing how the payment is shared amongst the different ratepayers. So if there's appetite for that, well, we could do that work, but the numbers are just going to be multiplications of what we've already provided, unless there's something different. So we could bring that and package that up next week, but it's not going to be any new information. So timeline would be then, if that's an option, that then we'd bring that to you in a paper early next year to formally adopt as the options for the consultation document, and then we'd consult with the public on that basis.
I do realise we're giving a bit of a direction, not so much there's no decisions in these workshops, which I'm clear on. However, I'd say with that, I don't mind that kind of money being done now, but also be nice to get some information of where those things could come from. I think that's what Greg might have been talking about. We're exploring those options too. You have given us some kōrero about where they come from the three pots that you mentioned, but it'd be good to know all that stuff too, just so we're all clear. So for me, I'd like to see us progress and see what options there are with a bit more information. That's a directive, isn't it?
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Patterson soon, but I'll just provide some input as well. If you could just flick back to the other consideration slide, please. I just think it's very important that we remember that any decision that we make has consequences, some unintended or not. I want to highlight that there it says the general ratepayer is not the exacerbator. It's not the general ratepayer that is creating the sewage that unfortunately is ending up in the lakes. This is coming from private property, and I know that there is opposing views in our community, especially from those from lower socioeconomic areas, and of course the high percentage of holiday homes that are in Lake Tarawera as well. So I do just want to note and remind councillors, as we will when we make our final decision early next year, that there are people in our community that we will be if we proceed with 4 million, 20 million, 1 million, any of those options for additional ratepayer funding, that funding is coming from those in our community who are already contributing $2,700 per property, and who we do hear on certainly a weekly basis, sometimes daily, how difficult it is for them already just to get by for basic things, food, petrol. The last thing I want to do is to be increasing rates when they personally do not see any value, and certainly not within public spaces. So I do just want to share that there is an opposing view to that. I'm open to consulting our community. This is for 550 properties, but I think we have 22,500 actually. Is it 27,000? If you flick to the change of funding options, we've got the figures there of ratepayers affected. So we do obviously need to make decisions in the best interest of the wider district. So I'll just put that reminder there as well, because I'm just nervous that we will get to the final day to make decisions, and everything that we add on adds on to the ratepayers' final contribution to this. So we'll go Councillor Patterson, and we'll take any final feedback and move on to the next topic.
Just a point of clarification, will this be available to us on Stella?
Yes, it is now. We do apologise, there have been some technical difficulties though. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you again, Tamanaka. I'm actually very much in favour of what's been presented, and I hope that we can see some more work done on this. Certainly it captures for me the general direction in which I'd like us to explore, not commit to, but certainly explore. I do have some concerns about community expectations of Tarawera, particularly in regards the reduction in the regional council's rate. Before we commit, and one, for example, I'd be happy over time to see a very formula, perhaps where the rate increases as the EBOT rate reduces. My concern is, though, what commitments do we have that EBOT will either keep the current rate eliminated? Will it still stick to the schedule? I know it's been passed, but in the second part of that, or that it be reintroduced under another name. Because if we make commitments based on, forgive me for want of a better word, a swap, and yet our cousins over at Regional Council do not follow through on that, then one, there's an issue of somewhat, some might say, betrayal, but then also the fact that we've been hoodwinked, and various factors that we've seen reductions on don't actually eventuate, or only eventuate for a temporary period, for various project reasons, I'm sure. So I have a concern on that, and that's where I'm a little bit on a commitment, shall we say, concern. And then the second part is the idea of the 50-50% funding. Now, I have a great deal of sympathy for our friends in Tarawera, and I'll continue to do what I can to help, but we have to accept that the deed funding was not something we did. That was a commitment by central government. Now, unfortunately, and I'm sorry I wasn't around, so I can't say what those reasons were, only 4 lakes were entered and others weren't. Now, we've asked, from what I hear, we've pursued central government extra funding, and unfortunately that answer has not been what we would have hoped at this point. So I think the first thing is we have to even ask ourselves, what is our level of commitment? Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? Is it 55-45? I think that's something we have to be aware of, because we may also be drawing a line in the sand for other projects down the line. Now, again, I regret that the deed funding's been set how it is, but that's not what we did. We didn't set this up. It was a central government offering. And I think we have to be very careful here and still keep in mind how percentages fall. I don't know that we can afford in this current climate, the way our books are appearing at this stage, a commitment to 50-50. I just don't think that that's acceptable or reasonable or fiscally responsible, in my opinion. Others may differ, but so I'm fully supporting. I think our staff, I think they're definitely heading in the right direction. Certainly around the certainty figure, I think is very important, just to re-establish some of those trusts that some of the community there feel those bounds have been broken slightly. So if we can look at a figure eventually, I'm prepared for us to look at that risk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think there's been plenty of direction given so far. We'll take a final comment from Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My attention has been drawn to a speech by Helen Clark, who kicked all of this off way back when. And in particular, she was referring to the 4 priority lakes, which excludes Tarawera. So what Councillor O'Brien mentioned before, I acknowledge. But she did make this comment, and this sort of brings us to the hub, I suppose, of the different views between whether the community should be paying for this or whether the Tarawera residents should be paying for it. But she said, the local community has signalled its willingness to make major contributions to the cost of restoration, yet a project of this scale is clearly beyond the ability of the councils alone to fund without excessive burden on their ratepayers. Nor should they be expected to do so when these lakes in our nation's tourism heartland matter to us all. I'll just leave that there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lee. And while we do all have the opportunity, if we wish to enjoy the lakes, there are many people in our community that can simply not afford the tank of gas to get them there. So we have to balance the real cost of living that our community that we represent is facing. And sorry, I did miss Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Worship. Really, it's just to endorse the direction that Councillor Brown and Councillor O'Brien, Councillor Widow, have gone down to provide options to us that give something to look at, that provide surety around the cost for the community, but also will help with the engagement with sign up as well. So just endorsing that direction to look, explore and have the options in front of us so that we can actually see them prepared, what they will look like, once they hit a potential consultation document would be really helpful. Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Sorry, Te Manukura, could I just quick question? So I reiterate my support for what our officers have brought. Is the CE in a position to talk to our partners at Regional Council about their plans to reduce their fund? And to see, because again, for me, that's going to be a big part of where we sit when we come to make decisions.
Councillor, I'm happy to pursue those discussions, but as you said, the power to set regional council rates certainly doesn't sit with me, and I'll pursue those conversations. But as you've said, whatever they've passed, that next year they could change, yes. Obviously subject to their processes, but certainly I don't have any increased ability to affect regional council rates than you do, sir.
Thank you, but knowing what a very intelligent man you are, you'd have a lot more sway than me, so I'd be comfortable for you to have those conversations. Thank you.
Councillor Wayne.
Thank you, Your Worship, and just a quick one as well. I support the comments made by my colleagues here around exploring these options, and I think most importantly providing that certainty for the residents out there. I really do agree with those comments around getting that, that confirmation from our partners over at the Regional Council around the intention and having a bit of agreement around what will be happening here. In terms of the funding, I think that is incredibly important to our decision making, which will definitely impact our decision making and have quite long-term impacts on our community and what they will be paying. At the same time, I also support Your Worship's comments around the affordability for the the majority of our community that will be potentially having to pay quite a bit extra, and also over quite a number of years as well. So it's a real balancing act that we will have to juggle. But I endorse the the page that you had up there before around the methodologies, the proposals for us to look into and to model. And I do agree that that hopefully will provide a bit of more certainty for our community and for the Tarawera community as well.
Thank you very much, and I'll just hand over to the Chief Executive to make some final comments perhaps on this before we move on to the next topic.
Thank you, Worship. I think I'm getting some good direction in terms of what some of the things you want to understand before we bring this topic back. So obviously we've got some clear understanding of what the other sources are. They aren't any different from the ones we've captured, so we'll maybe do a bit more work on just articulating that. But I'm hearing quite a bit around needing some certainty under regional council, so maybe I might undertake to write, and with Her Worship's support, send a letter to the Plenty Regional Council and seek their undertaking along the lines of today's discussion, and maybe I bring this topic back to you when I have a response from them, because it sounds like that's the one piece of the discussion we've still got maybe incomplete information on. So I think that's good direction.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Well, we'll wrap up this discussion for now, and we'll leave it with staff to come back with the final proposals for us in future. We now move to the next part of our workshop, which we will be taking in public excluded. The reason for this is to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations, and that comes from our Standing Order S7.2. And that is because the information that we will discuss next for our annual plan proposals does relate to commercial negotiations. Of course, at the appropriate time, we will bring forward those once they are final proposals into the public arena as soon as possible. So I ask for a mover and a seconder to please move into public excluded, and also as part of that, that we allow our airport staff to remain for this too. So I'll take that moved by Councillor O'Brien, seconded by Councillor Wang, moving into public excluded in our airport.